The sun was setting over the small town of Ridgewood, casting a warm orange glow across the streets. The day had been uneventful for Officer Daniel Harper, a man known for his strict adherence to rules and his no-nonsense approach to law enforcement. He had been patrolling the quieter parts of the town, where crime was rare and life moved at a slower pace. But as he drove past the local hospital, something caught his attention. An ambulance parked haphazardly on the side of the road. Its emergency lights were flashing, but there was no sign of an accident or any immediate crisis nearby. Curiosity tugged at him, and he decided to investigate. Slowing down his patrol car, Daniel pulled over behind the ambulance. As he stepped out, his boots crunching against the gravel, he noticed two men standing near the rear doors of the vehicle. One of them wore the familiar blue uniform of a paramedic, while the other appeared to be a civilian in casual clothes. Their voices carried through the evening air, sharp and raised in what sounded like an argument. Daniel's instincts kicked in immediately. Arguments involving emergency personnel weren't uncommon, but they always warranted attention. Someone could get hurt or worse, escalate the situation further. Approaching cautiously, Daniel tried to assess the scene before intervening. The paramedic seemed defensive, his hands gesturing wildly as he spoke. The civilian, on the other hand, looked agitated, his face flushed with anger. Whatever they were discussing, it wasn't going well. Daniel's training told him to defuse the situation quickly. Without wasting another moment, he walked up to the pair, his presence commanding authority. "What's going on here?" he barked, his tone firm and authoritative. The sudden intrusion startled both men, and they turned toward Daniel. For a split second, the paramedic locked eyes with the officer, but Daniel didn't recognize him in that fleeting glance. His focus was entirely on maintaining control of the situation. To him, this was just another potential disturbance that needed resolving. The civilian pointed accusingly at the paramedic, launching into an explanation about how the paramedic had refused to help him properly. Daniel barely listened. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this a case of misconduct? Or perhaps the civilian was causing trouble unnecessarily? Without waiting for clarity, Daniel made a decision. Assuming the paramedic was part of the problem, he reached out and grabbed the man by the shoulder, spinning him around forcefully. Before anyone could react, Daniel's fist connected with the side of the paramedic's face. The punch landed with a sickening thud, sending the unsuspecting medic stumbling backward. Gasps echoed from the few bystanders who had gathered to watch the commotion. Time seemed to freeze for a moment as everyone processed what had just happened, including Daniel himself. As the paramedic staggered back, clutching his jaw, Daniel felt a wave of unease wash over him. Something about the man's shocked expression struck a chord deep within him. It wasn't until the paramedic straightened up, his features illuminated under the flashing lights of the ambulance, that realization hit Daniel like a freight train. The man he had just punched wasn't a stranger. It was Jake Thompson, his childhood best friend. Memories flooded back in an instant. Summers spent playing baseball in the park, late-night talks about their dreams, and promises to always have each other's backs. Now those memories clashed painfully with the reality of the situation. Jake's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed into a glare filled with betrayal. "Dan, what the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, his voice trembling with a mix of pain and fury. Onlookers exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or simply observe the unfolding drama. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding in his chest. His mouth opened to speak, but words failed him. All he could manage was a stuttered apology, which sounded hollow even to his own ears. I thought," he began, trailing off when he realized how feeble his excuse sounded. The gravity of his mistake weighed heavily on Daniel. He hadn't meant to hurt Jake. He had acted purely on instinct, driven by years of conditioning to respond swiftly to perceived threats. But instincts can be dangerous when clouded by assumptions. And now, because of one reckless decision, Daniel had shattered the trust of someone who mattered deeply to him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant hum of traffic and the faint chirping of crickets. Jake, still reeling from the blow, took a step back, putting distance between himself and Daniel. His jaw throbbed and his pride stung even more. He couldn't believe this was happening, not with Dan, of all people. They had grown up together, shared countless memories, and supported each other through thick and thin. Yet here they were, standing face to face as enemies rather than friends. "You didn't even ask what was going on," Jake said bitterly, his voice laced with disappointment. "You just assumed I was the bad guy." Daniel wanted to explain, to justify his actions somehow, but he knew nothing he said would undo the damage. Instead, he stood there, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. The weight of his badge, usually a symbol of honor and duty, now felt like a burden he wasn't sure he deserved to carry. Around them, whispers spread among the crowd. Some sympathized with Daniel, reasoning that cops often had to make quick decisions under pressure. Others sided with Jake, outraged by the unnecessary violence. Either way, the incident was already becoming the talk of the town. Eventually, the paramedic crew managed to calm Jake down and convinced him to return to work. Daniel retreated to his patrol car, his mind racing with guilt and regret. As he drove away, he glanced in the rearview mirror, catching one last glimpse of Jake standing beside the ambulance. The image haunted him, replaying over and over in his head. How could he fix this? Could he even begin to repair the bond he had so carelessly broken? These questions gnawed at him throughout the night, leaving him restless and unable to sleep. The next morning, news of the altercation spread like wildfire through Ridgewood. Social media buzzed with videos and photos taken by curious onlookers. Some praised Daniel for taking decisive action, while others condemned him for using excessive force. The divide in public opinion only added to the tension simmering beneath the surface. At the police station, Daniel faced scrutiny from his colleagues and superiors. His captain called him into the office for a private discussion, demanding answers about why such a simple misunderstanding had spiraled out of control. Meanwhile, Jake struggled to focus on his duties as a paramedic. Every time he responded to a call, he found himself hyper-aware of the presence of police officers. The memory of Daniel's punch lingered, making it difficult to trust anyone wearing a badge. He declined offers of medical treatment for his injury, insisting he was fine, though the bruise on his jaw told a different story. Deep down, Jake wrestled with conflicting emotions: anger at Daniel for betraying their friendship, sadness over the loss of something precious, and a lingering hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be repaired. Despite the turmoil swirling around them, neither man gave up completely. Daniel made several attempts to reach out to Jake, calling and texting repeatedly. Each message went unanswered, adding to his growing sense of despair. Determined not to give up, Daniel decided to visit Jake in person. Late one evening, after his shift ended, he drove to Jake's house. Standing outside, he hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. Finally, summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, he knocked softly on the door. When Jake opened it, his expression hardened instantly. "What do you want?" he asked coldly, arms crossed defensively. Daniel swallowed, hard, forcing himself to meet Jake's gaze. "I wanted to apologize," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "I messed up, Jake. I shouldn't have done what I did." Jake stared at him for a long moment, his anger palpable. "You don't understand, Dan," he replied sharply. "It's not just about the punch. You didn't see me. You saw your assumptions." Those words cut deeper than any physical blow ever could. Daniel nodded slowly, acknowledging the truth in Jake's statement. There was nothing more he could say in that moment, so he turned and walked away, vowing to find a way to make amends. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test their friendship and ultimately strengthen it, in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The days following the incident felt like an eternity for both Daniel and Jake. For Daniel, every waking moment was consumed by guilt and regret. He replayed the scene in his mind over and over again. The flashing lights of the ambulance, Jake's shocked expression, and the sickening thud of his fist connecting with his best friend's face. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the image. It haunted him at work, during meals, and even in his dreams. The badge he wore, once a source of pride, now felt like a constant reminder of his failure. He began questioning whether he was truly cut out for this line of work. Was he too quick to judge? Too eager to act without thinking? These doubts gnawed at him relentlessly. At the police station, whispers about the altercation grew louder. Some officers defended Daniel, arguing that split-second decisions were part of the job. "You can't hesitate when you think someone's causing trouble," one colleague told him during a coffee break. But others were less forgiving, criticizing his lack of restraint. Rumors spread like wildfire, painting Daniel as either a hero or a villain, depending on who was telling the story. The division among his peers only added to his stress. Even his captain, usually supportive, seemed distant, reminding Daniel that public trust was fragile and needed to be earned back through actions, not words. For Jake, life became equally challenging. Returning to work after the incident proved difficult. Every time he stepped out of the ambulance, he couldn't help but glance around nervously, half expecting to see a patrol car nearby. The bruise on his jaw had faded, but the emotional wound remained raw. His colleagues noticed the change in him, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced by a quiet solemnity. When asked about it, Jake brushed off their concerns, insisting he was fine. But deep down, he knew he wasn't. The betrayal stung more than the physical pain ever could. How could Dan, his childhood best friend, do something so reckless? How could their bond shatter so easily? Despite his anger, Jake found himself reflecting on their shared history. Memories of lazy summer afternoons playing baseball flooded his mind. He remembered the countless times Dan had stood by him, when his parents divorced, when he struggled in school, and even when he decided to become a paramedic, despite everyone else doubting him. Those memories clashed painfully with the image of Dan standing there, fists clenched, ready to strike without hesitation. It was as if two versions of the same person existed, one who cared deeply and another who acted without thought or compassion. One evening, while driving home from a particularly grueling shift, Jake pulled over at a park they used to frequent as kids. Sitting on a bench overlooking the empty baseball field, he let his thoughts wander. The cool breeze carried the faint scent of freshly cut grass, stirring nostalgia within him. He realized that holding on to anger wasn't helping anyone, not him, not Dan, and certainly not their friendship. Forgiveness, however, felt impossible at the moment. He needed time to process everything, to figure out if their bond could ever recover from such a blow. Meanwhile, Daniel continued trying to reach out to Jake. Phone calls went unanswered, texts remained unread, and visits to Jake's house ended with closed doors. Each rejection weighed heavily on Daniel, but he refused to give up. One night, unable to sleep, he sat at his kitchen table and wrote a letter. Pouring his heart onto paper, he expressed his remorse in detail, how he regretted acting on impulse, how he wished he could turn back time and undo what he had done, and how much their friendship meant to him. He didn't sign the letter, instead leaving it unsigned and slipping it into an envelope. Early the next morning before heading to work, he placed the letter on Jake's doorstep, hoping it would bridge the gap between them. Jake found the letter later that day. At first he hesitated, unsure whether to read it or toss it aside. Curiosity eventually got the better of him, and he opened the envelope. As he read the heartfelt apology, his initial anger softened slightly. While the words didn't erase the pain, they showed that Dan was genuinely sorry. Jake didn't respond directly, but he mentioned the letter to a mutual friend who relayed the message back to Daniel. Hearing that Jake appreciated the gesture gave Daniel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps reconciliation wasn't entirely out of reach. In the weeks that followed, Daniel threw himself into community service projects. He volunteered at local events, helped organize fundraisers for underprivileged families, and participated in town hall meetings aimed at improving relations between law enforcement and citizens. His efforts didn't go unnoticed. People began seeing him not just as a cop, but as someone genuinely invested in making Ridgewood a better place. Even Jake, watching from afar, admitted to himself that maybe Dan truly regretted what happened. Maybe he deserved a second chance. One fateful afternoon, fate intervened once again. A minor car accident occurred near the hospital, drawing both emergency services and law enforcement to the scene. As Daniel directed traffic and ensured safety, he spotted Jake tending to one of the victims. Their eyes met briefly, and though neither said anything, there was a flicker of acknowledgement, a silent truce hanging precariously in the air. It was a small moment, barely noticeable to anyone else, but it carried immense significance for both men. Encouraged by this unspoken connection, Jake took a step forward. He invited Daniel to grab coffee after their respective shifts. Though hesitant at first, Daniel accepted the invitation. They met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town, where the atmosphere was calm and free from prying eyes. The conversation started awkwardly, with both men fumbling for words, but as they reminisced about old memories, playing baseball, pulling pranks, and dreaming big, they gradually eased into familiarity. Laughter returned, tentative at first, but growing stronger with each passing minute. Eventually, they broached the subject of the punch. Jake admitted that he understood why Daniel reacted the way he did, acknowledging the pressures faced by police officers daily. "But you have to remember," Jake said earnestly, "that sometimes assumptions can hurt more than fists." Daniel nodded, absorbing the lesson. He promised to be more mindful in the future, to listen before acting, and to value people over preconceived notions. The conversation wasn't perfect, it wasn't meant to erase the past, but it marked the beginning of healing. As weeks turned into months, their renewed friendship blossomed. Together, they co-hosted workshops aimed at fostering better communication between first responders. Sharing their story as a cautionary tale, they emphasized the importance of empathy, understanding, and teamwork. Residents admired their courage to confront past mistakes and move forward constructively. In time, the incident faded into the background, replaced by stories of collaboration rather than conflict. Daniel learned valuable lessons about patience and restraint, qualities essential for effective policing. Jake, too, gained perspective on the challenges faced by officers daily. United once more, they stood as living proof that even broken bonds can mend stronger than before, if given enough effort and understanding. And so, in the heart of Ridgewood, an unlikely chapter closed, leaving behind wisdom and resilience etched into its history. Their journey taught them that forgiveness isn't easy, nor is it instantaneous. It requires vulnerability, humility, and a willingness to grow. For Daniel and Jake, the road to redemption was paved with missteps and setbacks, but also with moments of grace and hope. Through it all, they emerged not just as friends, but as partners committed to building bridges where walls once stood. Their story served as a reminder that humanity thrives not in perfection, but in the ability to rise above imperfections, to choose connection over division, understanding over judgment, and love over resentment. The weeks following their coffee meeting marked a turning point for Daniel and Jake. Though the wounds from their past were far from healed, they both made conscious efforts to rebuild what had been broken. For Daniel, this meant not just apologizing, but proving through actions that he was committed to change. He began attending training sessions focused on de-escalation techniques, learning how to approach tense situations with calmness rather than aggression. These workshops weren't mandatory for seasoned officers like him, but he insisted on participating, knowing it was crucial for personal growth and regaining trust, not just from Jake, but from the community as well. Jake, too, took steps toward reconciliation. While he still carried lingering resentment, he recognized that holding on to anger wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he channeled his emotions into something productive. He started mentoring younger paramedics, sharing stories about his experiences and emphasizing the importance of staying level-headed under pressure. During one such session, he briefly mentioned the altercation with Daniel, framing it as a lesson in miscommunication and the dangers of jumping to conclusions. His colleagues listened intently, inspired by his ability to turn a painful experience into a teaching moment. Their renewed connection didn't go unnoticed by others in Ridgewood. Word spread quickly about how Daniel and Jake were working together to mend their friendship. Some residents admired their willingness to confront their mistakes openly, while others remained skeptical, questioning whether forgiveness could truly erase the damage done. A local journalist even approached them for an interview, hoping to write a feature story about their journey. Both men politely declined, agreeing that their reconciliation was personal and not something they wanted splashed across headlines. They preferred to let their actions speak louder than words. Despite these positive strides, challenges continued to arise. One evening, while responding to a domestic dispute call, Daniel found himself face-to-face with Jake again. The situation was chaotic. A couple arguing loudly, neighbors peering out of windows, and children crying in the background. As Daniel tried to mediate the conflict, Jake arrived with his team to assess if anyone needed medical attention. Seeing each other in such a high-stress environment brought back memories of their own confrontation. For a brief moment, tension crackled between them, unspoken yet palpable. But instead of letting old fears resurface, they chose to communicate. Daniel stepped aside, allowing Jake to take the lead in assessing the family's needs. I know if you need backup," Daniel said quietly, his tone respectful. Jake nodded, appreciating the gesture. It was a small act of cooperation, but it symbolized progress. By the end of the night, the couple had calmed down and no arrests were made. As they packed up their equipment, Jake turned to Daniel and said, "You handled that well. Thanks for stepping back." Daniel smiled faintly, grateful for the acknowledgement. Moments like these reinforced their commitment to moving forward. As time passed, their interactions became less guarded and more natural. They started running into each other at community events, where locals often gathered to celebrate festivals or support charitable causes. At first, their conversations were polite but brief, limited to exchanging pleasantries. But gradually, they grew comfortable enough to reminisce about old times and share updates about their lives. Jake talked about his plans to specialize in trauma care, while Daniel shared his aspirations to mentor new recruits at the police academy. Their mutual respect deepened, laying the foundation for a stronger bond. One day, during a charity softball game organized by the town council, fate gave them another opportunity to reconnect. Teams were formed randomly, and by coincidence, Daniel and Jake ended up playing on the same side. Standing on the field brought back memories of their childhood games, when life seemed simpler and their biggest worry was striking out during practice. As they joked around, tossing the ball back and forth, it felt like no time had passed at all. The crowd cheered as Jake hit a home run, and Daniel clapped enthusiastically, shouting encouragement from the dugout. That evening, surrounded by laughter and camaraderie, they realized how much they had missed this sense of companionship. Inspired by their growing rapport, Daniel proposed an idea that would bring their professions closer together. He suggested organizing joint training exercises for police officers and paramedics, focusing on teamwork and communication in high-pressure scenarios. Jake loved the concept and immediately offered to help plan the sessions. Together they worked tirelessly, designing drills that simulated real-life emergencies. The goal was to foster mutual understanding and ensure smoother collaboration during actual crises. When the first workshop was held, participants praised the initiative, noting how valuable it was to learn directly from someone outside their usual circle. These workshops not only strengthened professional ties, but also solidified Daniel and Jake's friendship. They spent hours discussing strategies, debating best practices, and fine-tuning every detail. Through these discussions, they gained deeper insights into each other's roles and responsibilities. Jake learned about the split-second decisions officers often had to make, while Daniel understood the immense pressure paramedics faced in life-or-death situations. This exchange of perspectives helped them appreciate the complexities of each other's jobs, further bridging the gap created by misunderstanding. Ridgewood began noticing the ripple effects of their partnership. Citizens reported feeling safer, knowing that law enforcement and emergency medical services were working hand in hand. Local businesses donated funds to support additional training programs, and schools invited Daniel and Cow. As the months rolled on, Daniel and Jake's collaboration grew into something larger than either of them had anticipated. Their joint training workshops became a cornerstone of community engagement in Ridgewood, drawing participants not just from their respective fields but also from neighboring towns. Word spread quickly about the innovative approach they were taking to improve communication between first responders. Firefighters, dispatchers, and even social workers began attending the sessions, eager to learn how better teamwork could save lives. What started as a personal effort to mend their friendship had transformed into a movement aimed at strengthening the entire emergency response system. The feedback from these workshops was overwhelmingly positive. Participants appreciated the hands-on nature of the drills, which simulated real-life scenarios ranging from car accidents to active shooter situations. One drill, in particular, stood out, a mock crisis involving a multi-vehicle pileup during a snowstorm. The exercise required paramedics, police officers, and firefighters to coordinate seamlessly under extreme conditions. As chaos unfolded on the makeshift scene, tensions ran high, but thanks to the lessons learned in previous sessions, everyone stayed focused on their roles while maintaining clear lines of communication. When the drill concluded, applause erupted from the observers, many of whom were local residents curious about the program's impact. Daniel and Jake took pride in seeing their hard work pay off. They often debriefed after each session, discussing what went well and identifying areas for improvement. These conversations allowed them to reflect not only on the effectiveness of the workshops, but also on their own growth as individuals. Daniel admitted that he used to view his role as strictly authoritative, someone who gave orders rather than worked alongside others. Now he saw himself as part of a team, where every member contributed equally to achieving a common goal. Jake, too, acknowledged that he had initially been resistant to collaborating with law enforcement, harboring lingering doubts about their intentions. But working closely with Daniel reminded him that trust could be rebuilt through consistent effort and mutual respect. Their partnership extended beyond professional development. They started volunteering together at community events, further cementing their bond. Whether it was handing out water bottles at a charity run or setting up booths at health fairs, they were always side by side, sharing jokes and stories like old times. Residents noticed the change in their dynamic and couldn't help but admire how far they had come. Children pointed them out excitedly, calling them the cop and the medic who fixed things instead of arguing. Even skeptics who had doubted their reconciliation began warming up to the idea, realizing that forgiveness wasn't just possible, it was powerful. One evening, as they packed up supplies after a neighborhood cleanup event, Jake turned to Daniel. With a thoughtful expression, "You know," he said, "we should tell our story publicly, not for us, but for others." Daniel raised an eyebrow, surprised by the suggestion. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. Jake explained that sharing their journey, from conflict to reconciliation, could inspire others facing similar challenges. It wasn't about glorifying their mistakes, but showing that healing was possible with effort and humility. After some consideration, Daniel agreed, recognizing the potential impact such a message could have. They decided to present their story at a town hall meeting scheduled for the following month. Preparing for the talk proved more challenging than expected. Both men struggled to articulate their emotions without sounding rehearsed or overly dramatic. They spent hours practicing in Daniel's living room, pacing back and forth as they fine-tuned their words. Jake emphasized the importance of honesty, urging Daniel to be vulnerable about his regrets. Daniel, in turn, encouraged Jake to highlight his perspective as someone who had felt betrayed. By the time the day arrived, they felt ready, or at least as ready as they could be. The town hall meeting drew a large crowd, filling the auditorium with curious faces. As Daniel and Jake took the stage, the room fell silent. Daniel began by recounting the infamous night when everything went wrong, the flashing lights, the heated argument, and the punch that shattered years of friendship. His voice wavered slightly as he described the guilt and shame that followed. Then Jake stepped in, sharing his side of the story. He spoke candidly about feeling hurt and disillusioned, admitting that forgiveness hadn't come easily. Together, they walked the audience through their journey of rebuilding trust, emphasizing the importance of patience, empathy, and open communication. When they finished speaking, The room erupted into applause. Several people stood up, moved by the raw honesty of their account. A young woman approached them afterward, tears streaming down her face. "My dad is a cop and my brother is a paramedic," she explained. "They've been fighting for years, and I didn't think they'd ever make peace. Hearing your story gives me hope." Others shared similar sentiments, thanking Daniel and Jake for reminding them that broken relationships could heal if given enough care and understanding. Encouraged by the response, they expanded their outreach efforts. Local schools invited them to speak to students about conflict resolution and the value of teamwork. Businesses requested motivational talks for employees, highlighting the importance of collaboration in any workplace. Even regional news outlets covered their story, though Daniel and Jake insisted on keeping the focus on the message rather than themselves. They wanted people to see their experience as a blueprint for overcoming adversity, not as a tale of individual heroism. Amid all the attention, they remained grounded, never losing sight of why they started this journey in the first place. For Daniel, it was about proving that accountability and growth were integral parts of leadership. For Jake, it was about demonstrating that compassion and resilience could overcome even the deepest wounds. Together, they embodied the belief that true strength lies not in avoiding mistakes but in learning from them. Their renewed friendship also brought unexpected benefits to their personal lives. Daniel reconnected with old friends he had drifted apart from over the years, inspired by Jake's openness to rebuilding connections. He even started dating again, introducing his new partner to Jake at a barbecue. To his relief, the two hit it off immediately, easing any lingering awkwardness. Jake, meanwhile, found joy in mentoring younger paramedics, passing on the lessons he had learned about perseverance and forgiveness. His colleagues often joked that he was becoming the heart of their team, always ready with advice or encouragement. As winter approached, Ridgewood prepared for its annual holiday festival, a celebration filled with lights, music, and goodwill. This year, Daniel and Jake played key roles in organizing the event, ensuring safety measures were in place while fostering a sense of unity among attendees. On the night of the festival, as snowflakes danced in the air and carolers sang cheerful tunes, they stood side by side near the main stage, watching families gather around the towering Christmas tree. It was a stark contrast to the tension-filled nights of their past, a testament to how far they had come. A child tugged at Jake's sleeve, holding out a candy cane. "For you, Mr. Medic," the boy chirped before running off to join his friends. Jake chuckled, turning to Daniel with a grin. "Looks like we're officially town heroes now," he teased. Daniel laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, we're just doing our jobs, and maybe trying to fix a few mistakes along the way." That moment encapsulated everything they had worked toward: redemption, reconciliation, and a renewed sense of purpose. Their story served as a reminder that life's greatest challenges often lead to its most profound transformations. Through pain and perseverance, Daniel and Jake had not only healed their friendship, but also strengthened an entire community. And as they stood there, surrounded by laughter and warmth, they knew their partnership would continue to inspire others for years to come. The holiday season brought a sense of renewal to Ridgewood, and Daniel and Jake found themselves at the center of it all. Their efforts to mend their friendship and contribute to the community had created ripples that touched nearly everyone in town. From the children who now waved enthusiastically at them on the streets to the elderly residents who stopped them for friendly chats, they were no longer just a cop and a paramedic. They were symbols of hope and resilience. The annual festival marked the culmination of months of hard work, and as they stood together under the twinkling lights, they couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude. But even amidst the joy, challenges still lingered. While most people embraced their story, there were those who remained critical. Some believed Daniel's actions during the altercation were unforgivable, regardless of his subsequent efforts to make amends. Others questioned whether Jake was being too lenient, arguing that forgiving such behavior set a dangerous precedent. These voices, though quieter than before, served as reminders that not everyone heals at the same pace, and that forgiveness is often a journey rather than a destination. Daniel felt the weight of these criticisms acutely. He carried them like an invisible burden, striving to prove through his actions that he was worthy of redemption. Every call he responded to, every interaction with the public, became an opportunity to demonstrate growth. He made it a point to listen more and speak less, ensuring that his decisions were guided by empathy rather than instinct. It wasn't easy. There were moments when old habits threatened to resurface, but he persevered, knowing that trust was earned one step at a time. Jake, too, faced his own struggles. Though he had forgiven Daniel, he occasionally caught himself questioning whether he had moved on completely. Late at night, lying awake in bed, memories of that fateful evening would creep back into his mind. The sting of betrayal, though fainter now, still lingered. Yet instead of letting these thoughts consume him, he used them as motivation to keep pushing forward. He reminded himself that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about learning to live alongside the scars without letting them define you. Their bond continued to strengthen as they supported each other through these ups and downs. One particularly cold January morning, Jake received a distressing call while on duty. A young boy had been hit by a car near the school, and the situation looked dire. As Jake rushed to the scene, his heart raced, not just from adrenaline, but from fear. When he arrived, he saw Daniel already there, directing traffic and keeping bystanders at bay. Without hesitation, Jake sprang into action, assessing the boy's condition and administering first aid. Meanwhile, Daniel coordinated with emergency dispatch to ensure backup arrived quickly. In that moment, their teamwork was seamless. They communicated with precision, each knowing exactly what the other needed without having to ask. As the ambulance sped away with the boy safely aboard, Jake turned to Daniel, his face pale but determined. "Thanks for stepping up," he said simply. Daniel nodded, his expression somber. "We did our jobs," he replied. But beneath the surface, both men knew how much this incident meant. It wasn't just another rescue mission. It was proof that their partnership had evolved into something unshakable. Word of their heroic efforts spread quickly, earning them praise from the community once again. Parents whose children attended the school expressed their gratitude, hailing them as heroes. Local newspapers ran stories highlighting their quick thinking and collaboration, reinforcing the message that unity among first responders could save lives. For Daniel and Jake, however, the real reward lay in knowing they had made a difference. Not just for the boy and his family, but for everyone who witnessed their teamwork. Inspired by this experience, they decided to expand their outreach initiatives. They collaborated with schools to create programs aimed at teaching students about safety, conflict resolution, and the importance of working together. Role-playing exercises allowed kids to step into the shoes of police officers, paramedics, and firefighters, helping them understand the challenges faced by these professions. The sessions were met with enthusiasm, as children eagerly raised their hands to ask questions or share their thoughts. Seeing their curiosity and eagerness to learn filled Daniel and Jake with pride. Their growing influence extended beyond Ridgewood. Neighboring towns began reaching out, asking if they could replicate the workshops and training programs. Requests poured in from organizations seeking guidance on fostering better relationships between law enforcement and medical services. At first, Daniel and Jake hesitated, unsure if they had the capacity to take on such a large-scale endeavor. But after discussing it thoroughly, they realized that turning down these opportunities would mean missing a chance to make an even greater impact. With the support of their respective departments, they agreed to travel periodically to conduct seminars and share their insights. These trips proved to be eye-opening experiences. Each town they visited presented unique challenges and dynamics, forcing them to adapt their approach accordingly. In some places, tensions between residents and authorities ran high, requiring delicate handling and patience. In others, resources were limited, making collaboration essential for survival. Through it all, Daniel and Jake remained committed to their mission, drawing strength from each other and the communities they served. They learned as much from the people they met as they taught, gaining new perspectives that enriched their own understanding of teamwork and leadership. Back home, their absence was barely noticeable thanks to the strong network of colleagues and friends they had cultivated. Fellow officers stepped in to cover Daniel's shifts while Jake's teammates ensured his responsibilities were managed smoothly. This mutual support system reinforced their belief that true progress was only possible through collective effort. It wasn't just about two individuals overcoming adversity. It was about creating a culture of cooperation and compassion that transcended personal boundaries. As spring approached, bringing with it warmer weather and longer days, Daniel and Jake reflected on how far they had come. What started as a fractured friendship had blossomed into a partnership capable of inspiring entire communities. They celebrated small victories along the way, a successful workshop here, a heartfelt thank you note there, but never lost sight of the bigger picture. Their ultimate goal was to leave behind a legacy of unity and understanding, ensuring that future generations inherited a world where differences were bridged rather than widened. One sunny afternoon, as they sat on a park bench overlooking the baseball field where they had spent countless childhood hours, Jake turned to Daniel with a thoughtful smile. "Do you ever think about how different things might have been if that night hadn't happened?" he asked. Daniel paused, considering the question carefully. "Maybe we wouldn't have grown the way we did," he admitted. "Sometimes it takes hitting rock bottom to realize what really matters." Jake nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I guess some lessons are worth the pain," he said softly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as kids chased each other across the grass and laughter echoed in the air. Life in Ridgewood had returned to its usual rhythm, yet it felt richer somehow, as if their journey had infused it with newfound meaning. That evening, as they walked back to their cars, Daniel stopped suddenly. "You know," he said, glancing at Jake, "we should write a book." Jake raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A book? About what?" Daniel grinned. "About everything. Our mistakes, our lessons, our comeback. Something people can turn to when they're struggling to find their way." Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "Only you would suggest something like that," he teased. But deep down, he knew it was a good idea. Their story wasn't just theirs anymore. It belonged to anyone willing to believe in second chances. Over the next few weeks, they began drafting chapters, pouring their hearts into every word. Writing forced them to confront emotions they hadn't fully processed, revisiting painful memories and celebrating milestones alike. It was cathartic in a way, allowing them to see their journey from a fresh perspective. By the time summer rolled around, they had completed a rough draft, ready to share with trusted friends and mentors for feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Readers praised the authenticity of their narrative, noting how relatable and impactful it was. Encouraged by the reception, they submitted the manuscript to publishers, hoping to reach an even wider audience. Months later, when the book finally hit shelves, it quickly gained traction, sparking conversations about forgiveness, accountability, and the power of human connection. Bookstores hosted signings where fans lined up to meet the authors and express their gratitude. For Daniel and Jake, these interactions were humbling reminders of why they had embarked on this path in the first place. Through it all, they remained grounded, never losing sight of their roots. Ridgewood remained their anchor, a place where their story began and where their hearts truly belonged. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, with courage, humility, and unwavering determination. The success of their book brought Daniel and Jake unexpected fame, but they handled it with the same humility that had defined their journey. Book tours took them to cities across the country, where they spoke at conferences, libraries, and community centers. Audiences ranged from seasoned professionals seeking inspiration to everyday people grappling with personal conflicts. Each talk was an opportunity to reinforce the message they had worked so hard to spread, that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to strength, and that even the deepest wounds can heal with time and effort. Their story resonated deeply with many. A young police officer approached them after one event, tears streaming down his face. "I messed up big time," he confessed. "I hurt someone I care about, and I don't know if I can fix it." Daniel placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You can start by acknowledging your mistake," he said gently. "Then, take small steps every day to show you're serious about making things right." Jake chimed in, adding, "And remember, healing isn't linear. There will be setbacks, but what matters is that you keep trying." These moments reminded them why they had chosen to share their experience publicly. It wasn't about glorifying their struggles or positioning themselves as experts. It was about offering hope to those who felt trapped in cycles of guilt, anger, or regret. They often stayed late after events, signing copies of their book and engaging in heartfelt conversations with attendees. Though exhausting, these interactions fueled their passion for creating positive change. Back in Ridgewood, life continued to evolve. The town embraced its newfound reputation as a model of unity and collaboration, thanks in large part to Daniel and Jake's influence. Schools incorporated conflict resolution lessons into their curriculums. Businesses implemented team-building workshops inspired by their methods, and local leaders prioritized initiatives aimed at fostering trust between residents and authorities. Even the annual festival grew larger each year, drawing visitors from neighboring towns eager to witness the spirit of cooperation firsthand. Despite their busy schedules, Daniel and Jake remained committed to serving their community. Their partnership extended beyond joint appearances and training sessions. They became confidants, mentors, and advocates for anyone in need. When a new recruit joined the police force, Daniel made it a point to introduce him to Jake, ensuring the rookie understood the importance of working alongside paramedics. Similarly, when a fresh-faced paramedic started her first shift, Jake encouraged her to shadow Daniel during a patrol, demystifying the role of law enforcement and breaking down stereotypes. Their bond also enriched their personal lives. Daniel found joy in spending weekends hiking with Jake and their families, laughing over shared meals and reminiscing about old times. Jake, meanwhile, discovered a love for photography, capturing candid moments of their adventures together. These snapshots adorned the walls of their homes, serving as visual reminders of how far they had come. Friends teased them about being inseparable, but neither minded. After everything they had endured, they cherished the simplicity of just being there for each other. Yet challenges still arose. One particularly difficult incident occurred when a controversial decision by the police department sparked protests in Ridgewood. Some accused officers of bias while others defended their actions, leading to heated debates that divided the town. As tensions escalated, both Daniel and Jake felt the weight of expectation. People looked to them as mediators, hoping they could bridge the gap once again. Determined to address the issue constructively, they organized a town hall meeting focused on open dialogue. Residents were invited to voice their concerns, frustrations, and suggestions, while representatives from various sectors, including law enforcement, healthcare, education, and local government, listened attentively. Daniel and Jake facilitated the discussion, emphasizing the importance of listening without judgment and finding common ground. Though emotions ran high, the session ended with tentative agreements to implement reforms and improve transparency. In the aftermath, Daniel faced criticism from some colleagues who felt he had compromised the integrity of the force. Jake, too, encountered resistance from peers who believed he should have taken a firmer stance against the protesters. Both men struggled with these conflicting opinions, questioning whether they had done enough to balance fairness with accountability. But ultimately, they stood by their decision, knowing that progress required uncomfortable conversations and sacrifices. Their resilience earned them even greater respect within the community. Residents rallied around them, organizing support groups and petitions to advocate for systemic changes. Local media praised their leadership, highlighting how their approach had prevented potential violence and fostered understanding. For Daniel and Jake, this reinforced their belief that true leadership meant putting the needs of others above personal gain. As years passed, their legacy continued to grow. Younger generations viewed them as role models, aspiring to emulate their dedication to service and reconciliation. Students wrote essays about their story, artists painted murals celebrating their partnership, and musicians composed songs inspired by their journey. Even outside Ridgewood, their names became synonymous with hope and perseverance, a reminder that humanity thrives when we choose connection over division. Eventually, retirement loomed on the horizon. Both men approached this milestone with mixed emotions. On one hand, they were ready to step back and enjoy quieter lives surrounded by loved ones. On the other, they worried about leaving behind gaps that might undermine the progress they had worked so hard to achieve. To ease this transition, they began mentoring successors, individuals passionate about carrying forward their mission. They trained these protégés rigorously, instilling in them the values of empathy, teamwork, and accountability. When the day finally came for Daniel to hang up his badge and Jake to retire his uniform, the entire town turned out to honor them. A grand ceremony was held in the park where they had spent countless childhood hours playing baseball. Speeches were delivered, awards presented, and memories shared. As they stood side by side, looking out at the sea of smiling faces, they felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. Their journey had been long and arduous, but every challenge had been worth it. In retirement, they pursued passions they had set aside during their careers. Daniel took up woodworking, crafting furniture that told stories through intricate designs. Jake dedicated himself to volunteering at youth centers, teaching kids life-saving skills and sharing tales of resilience. Together they traveled, exploring places they had always dreamed of visiting. Each destination offered new perspectives, enriching their understanding of the world and reinforcing their belief in the power of human connection. Though no longer active in their professions, they remained involved in advocacy work. They consulted with organizations striving to improve relations between communities and emergency services, lending their expertise and insights. Their book continued to inspire readers worldwide, translated into multiple languages and adapted into educational materials. Requests for interviews and speaking engagements poured in regularly, though they accepted only those aligned with their values. Looking back on their lives, Daniel and Jake marveled at how much had changed since that fateful night. What began as a devastating blow to their friendship had blossomed into a lifelong partnership rooted in mutual respect and shared purpose. They had weathered storms, faced criticism, and overcome self-doubt, all while inspiring countless others to do the same. Their story proved that redemption was possible, that second chances mattered, and that forgiveness could transform lives. One crisp autumn morning, as they sat on the porch of Jake's cabin overlooking a serene lake, Daniel broke the silence. "Do you think we did enough?" he asked, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Jake smiled, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "I think we did our best," he replied. "And sometimes that's all anyone can ask for." They sat quietly, watching the sun rise over the water, casting golden ripples across its surface. Life had come full circle, bringing them back to a place of peace and contentment. They knew challenges would always exist, that the world would never be perfect, but they also knew that kindness, courage, and determination could light the way forward. And as long as people chose to embrace those qualities, their legacy would endure, reminding future generations that even the darkest nights give way to dawn.